So it's, I think, the third or the fourth time I come here, and each time I feel more like home. And we have been working with within the CompMusic project for some time now, and for me it was an adventure. I'm sure for you it was really an adventure also. The adventure started with Andre and me, just a group of two people at the beginning. Maybe you remember that time. There were times where we had physical difficulties. We couldn't give Andre a silent room to work, and we had to make him move to Boğaziçi, but then it was a nice move. We could get some support from other people like Taylan Cemgil. So there were many people who were part of the team, but they left. So, well, but we could keep up work because there was constant support from here. And finally, we had 3 master's students who recently finished. I'm going to talk about melodic analysis for Turkish Makam music. And I will also try to give you a glimpse of microtonality and how melodies and microtonality are interlinked. I want to play you some examples, and I hope at the end you have a better feeling about, oh, okay, they were all the time talking about microtonality. Now I have some feeling about it. Okay? So I will start with a simple introduction of makam and melody. And then I will discuss a little bit about the music analysis or melodic analysis applied by musicians and musicologists for what targets they do analysis. And I will talk about automatic melodic segmentation after putting that context. But I want to start with my personal interest in Turkish music analysis. It was, I lived in a, let's say, pop culture, city life in Istanbul and in Izmir. All of my friends are, let's say, like that. Most of us, we are not aware about microtonality or so. Most of us cannot recognize makams. While I was playing guitar, I learned pop music and then blues and then jazz. There was a point 10 years ago, I decided to learn makam music. So learning to play guitar was through books and educational material. So I took a few lessons, and then I had everything necessary to learn from. And I never felt like inconsistencies or difficulties. Everything was there, clear. That was my feeling. I could learn from the available material. But when I started with makam music, that was not the case. So 10 years ago, when I picked up all of the, let's say, most cited theory books, and I would try to read them, it seemed inconsistent to me, some of the things they were talking about. And there were always these circular explanations. A is explained in terms of B and C, and then B is explained in terms of A and C, and then C in terms of B and A. And you read all this stuff, you feel there are inconsistencies, and you feel that, well, that maybe you're not getting what you should get from the text. So there was a difficulty of learning that music. And when I consulted people who play this music, they would say, well, you learn it by spending lots of time with the masters. And they would say, okay, you have to spend years, just spend time with them, you would play. So the, let's say, teaching style, at that moment I thought, okay, that means you are subject to examples. You try to learn repertoire, you are subject to music, trying to play it, and in time, by some process which I cannot define now, in a matter of time, you learn categories. You learn playing, you learn ornamentations, and there was, 100 years ago, there was a movement from oral culture to written culture, and there was some theory introduced, but it was based on Western music. Some of the conflict, the feelings of conflict came from there, I understood in time. There were some concepts coming from Western music applied directly to this music, but there was a mixture of everything. So I felt uncomfortable in learning this music, and I said, well, I'm an engineer. At least I should be able to go to the recordings, to the repertoire, and learn from it. Maybe I could develop some tools. For example, for intonation and tuning. So there was this tuning, the temperament theories, but there were lots of discussions that they weren't able to explain the music. So I said, okay, maybe as an engineer, I could develop tools that would help us learn from recordings and the repertoire. So that's where I started, and I still have that feeling, and that's my direction. I want to help, well, everyone to provide tools that would help us learn from recordings and learn from the repertoire. And you can think this is the general context of what I'm going to talk about. Okay. There will be a repeated error in this presentation. I want to avoid Turkish music terms because my experience with the Indian case, when there are too many new terms, it's difficult to relate to. So I will make this error of using Western music terms, but I want you to consider these not exact translations, but terms pointing to similar concepts. I think things will be still clear, and I won't be making too big errors. Okay. Now, Makam is considered to be a design for a melodic contour. Okay. And it would start with a scale description, and we would have a melodic progression description. So it's some kind of a description for a contour, overall contour. A scale would often be explained through connections of tetra or pentachords. Here the chord does not refer to simultaneous notes, but a sequence of 4 or 5 notes in a scale. So you just try to split the scale in the middle. You would have a tetrachord and a pentachord. And those would include microtonal intervals. And there is the functional hierarchy of the tones. So you have a scale, but some of the tones are more important. The melodies would end most of the time in those tones. And they are emphasized. Which note is emphasized may even define the character of the makam. And the melodic progression is considered to be an ordered progression of, they call flavors. The Turkish word is çeşni, which is, it's like a taste. You would use the same term for food. Okay? So if you add some, I don't know, it's like a taste of, let's say, food, then it's a sequence of melodies created by functional use of chord material. So you have the chord material, but you have to use it in a specific way to emphasize certain pitches, and there is an order for that. At least for the beginning and the end, and you have some freedom in between. I want you to get familiar with some of the concepts so that some of the things I'm going to talk about will make more sense. So I took a makam that's close to G major. You see that we have Western representation for notation, and it's G major from G to G. You have F sharp. And we have a B flat here, where the flat is just reversed. And this would refer to a shorter flat, the interval being shorter. Okay. And you have some extra parts. This would explain, when you are given this in a theory book, this means there is a melodic range. So this is the main octave, and you could use some extension to the lower side and the higher pitch also. This would be the main region where you will develop your melodies, and you don't have to have the same notes on the octave. Some of the pitches may change. Okay? Octave equivalence may not apply for some of the makams. Okay. And well, here there are some indications of intervals. They have, in theory, they have named the intervals between notes. We have 6 of them, and their sizes are defined in terms of they call it comma, It's Holderian comma or Mercator comma. And the simplest way of explaining it is taking a whole tone, you divide it into 9, you have one comma. So this reversed flat is just 22 cents. Okay? It's a very short interval. So you have some half tone-like, two versions of half tone-like intervals, and two versions of whole tone-like intervals. And based on my measurements, I would come up with maybe 8 or 9 intervals would be sufficient to explain most of the microtonal scales. Okay. And the number of distinct chords, so the scales made of chord materials, you will see that chord material is the basis of melodic analysis. That's the reason I'm talking about chords. We have about 15 of them. Now, I want to also show you another Makam scale, that's Hüseyni. It's like A Dorian. So if you have G major, and just think the second mode of that could be like a Dorian scale. We have exactly the same pitches. But when they are played, when you hear it, you would see that some of the pitches, they are different than expected. I mean, the B flat and F sharps would have different pitches depending on this context being Hüseyni Makam or Ras Makam. So the pitches, the musician needs to interpret, would need to have an understanding of the context to be able to interpret with correct intonation what's being put on notation. So I would say there is an ambiguity in notation when you first look at it. You need to know the context to figure out the pitch of it. So if you would have a look at histograms of pitch, this is out of 15 recordings, this is around 15 recordings, you would see that you would have really an agreed lower pitch for the B flat, and for F sharp you would also see from the recordings there is an agreement that those pitches are lower. I want to make you listen to a few of those chord materials. So again, develop some familiarity. I picked on purpose something that's very familiar. This is like major. The blue lines are the Western intervals. Well, not Western. Let's say 12 set equal intervals. And you can immediately spot that the major third is a bit lower for Turkish music. We have also a minor third here, which is a bit shorter, let's say. We have the same minor third here. So that some of the tones would match and some of the tones would not match. And I want to play a short excerpt of that chord. So I hope this sounded like major to you. Now there is, the minor third is also shorter. I didn't have a good example of that short, but I will play some other example. And so here we immediately spot that pitch, the B flat, which is like a quarter tone. And that's the reason in the Arabic world there is large use of quarter tones. Here is another chord where we have more of the unexpected. Okay? So you have the tonic matching, and then all of the others, except maybe this. Up to here, we have the chord, the 4 notes of the chord. They are off, and I want to make you listen to that. It will not be in order, but. I don't know, did it sound a bit weird or at least different than, let's say, Eurogenetic music? Now this we have these tones which have been discussed a lot if they are quarter tones or not. Even in, I think, 1932, there was a big congress in Cairo where all of the Makam world scholars came together and they argued, and the Turkish people left. So the rest, they decided about quarter tones and they use it largely. But the Turkish, they said, oh, this is not a quarter tone, and this is not I cannot make it a quarter. They want to keep those details. Okay. I want to play some real music examples of these three. So I hope this will maybe sound a bit familiar like major, and then you will hear maybe our Dorian mode, and then finally the Sabah, which has some extra, let's say, unfamiliar sounds. Now, this was the scale together with the melodic progression. So it also summarized the melodic contour. Okay. So there was kind of first the use of the first part of the scale with more emphasis there. Then it moved to the higher part of the scale and then came back, and that was to teach that makam. So it's summary progression to teach the makam. And here is an example from Encyclopédie de la musique, Lavignac, from 1922. So there was a topic on melodic progression of Turkish makam music, and that would include the scale plus a summary of the melodic contour. So this is the, let's say, simplest form of explaining the two basic dimensions of makam. So we need some specification about the melodic contour. In oral tradition, the master would describe this as a roadmap. Like you would emphasize this pitch with that material, and then you go to that pitch, you emphasize that one. If you stay there too long, it may be another makam, so you should be careful about that. And then would demonstrate and ask the people to play, and would, in time, correct. And finally, they arrive to maybe similar categorizations of makams. My experience with masters was that they also had some differences in understanding the makam, because there is a large repertoire and people learn from repertoire. Based on which part of the repertoire you have mastered, maybe you develop a different understanding. I don't know the exact process there. It's an open topic, but I've figured out the masters that, well, they wouldn't agree all the time on all of the details. There would be clashes, but learning is through playing and being subject to listening for long periods of time. Okay. After, I think this slide, I will go more towards a melody, but I want to also mention that given a list of notes, you can divide the scale into two at different locations. So this is one type of division, a pentachord followed by a tetrachord, or a tetrachord followed by a pentachord. Just the same note. What's the difference? Well, the blue note has a specific function. So the progression would start by emphasizing that. So it has a specific role. And the first one is used in 3 different makams. There are more makams, but I want to emphasize that there are 6 makams at least, using just the same set of 7 notes. And the main differences would be on the melodic contour and on the tones they would emphasize. So if you would, for example, look at the, again, pitch histograms, you would see that makam muhayyer would emphasize the tone muhayyer. So we have for each pitch a name, a long name, like muhayyer is A, high E, A. In Makam Hüseyini, this note will be emphasized. In Makam Neva, this note will be emphasized. So that means if you know, well, a subset of notes which are important in terms of emphasis, you can make distinction about the makams. Like if to distinguish between Makam Hüseyini and Muhayyer, which are very close, they use the same chord material. But look at the relative use of 3 different notes, you would immediately see that there is some separation in the parameter space. Okay? So relative emphasis of notes is critically important for makam characterization. Also, the melodic range is an important factor. So we again have 2 makams which use similar scale material. In one, you have examples on different ranges, melodic range, the minimum to maximum pitch, let's say. So Mahur examples wouldn't go below a range, so they should use larger. And also, if you look at the mean of melodies, Mahur would be more on the higher pitch compared to Rast. So we had the emphasis notes. Now we are talking about range, melodic range, and the mean of the melody, which makes difference for makams. Now there are categories for melodic progression, this contour. Okay. The contours have 3 categories. So every makam, when they are explained today, would be mapped, their contours would be mapped to one of these categories. But this is open to discussion. My experience with the makams, there are makams that wouldn't fit there. And there haven't been any corpus-based study from audio, from scores, to see how many clusters we have. Does this clustering really, what does it explain? I think we can contribute to the musicological knowledge by carrying a corpus-based study of these melodic contours. Okay, I want to skip this one. Oh, this I have hidden. Okay. Now, melodic analysis, I want to get closer to melodic analysis. For whom and for what? According to my interest, up to this point, I was interested in learning from recordings and learning from repertoire and carrying a corpus-based study. I wasn't really, let's say, music information retrieval guy up to this point. I didn't work too much on query problems, finding covers of songs or so. But my interests were mainly to get closer to musicians and musicologists and try to understand their needs. Also, try to come up with tools for my needs in learning music. So my direction is more in learning, let's say. For musicians, when they carry analysis, composition analysis, they would do something very similar to harmonic analysis in jazz. So put labels into portions of melodies, specify the chord material and the emphasis note. Okay? And when they do that, you will see, I will try to give an example of that. They want to disambiguate certain pitches. For example, the B flat and F sharp I was talking about, its intonation will be based on the context, and they have to decide about the context, so they would have an understanding about the melodic context to be able to play it correctly. For musicologists, they mainly work on Makam characterization, for example, with respect to time periods, because the Makam understanding changes across time, and there is no corpus-based study of that. So, well, it's also questionable the material we have, the notation, for example. The first, let's say, notation we have is from the beginning of the century, 19th century. So we cannot go beyond it, but, well, that's another debate. Where musicologists would try to categorize makams by taking examples from repertoire, putting labels, and coming out with conclusions out of those comparisons. And comparing makam understandings of composers, how a specific composer uses a certain makam. These are, I would say, just perfect fit for corpus-based computational musicology. Because we have some recordings, we have some notation, some scores. So musicologists would also work on stylistic analysis of performance. So we have improvisations, like taksims, which should provide kind of a summary of a makam. So it's a composition on the fly, but there are certain rules, so it should really emphasize, it should be built on that contour, melody contour. So they would try to transcribe and analyze through those transcriptions to understand the style, the performer's understanding of the makam. And there is also the form-makam relationship, because in a way, makam defines the form by supplying a melodic shape, an overall melodic shape. But we also have the form where there are repetitions of sections and how the two temporal designs work together. Is also a topic musicologists are working on, and usually one of the materials they like a lot are these Mevlevi ceremony music, because you have a large form there, composition that lasts, well, it's a collection of compositions that lasts for almost an hour, or you have short versions, but, well, the whirling dervishes, they would dance, dance would be, let's say, risky to say. So because it's also religious. It's a large form, and many people work on this, trying to understand the relationship between form and the melodic contours of makams. Okay. Some example about the type of analysis they do. So this is a score we have. And, in conservatory, there is a specific course where they teach how one should divide this into some pieces, segments, and put labels. And this label is based on the chord, and this is for the emphasized note or the root of that specific chord. Even though they teach it as a formal lecture, there are debates going on. Many musicians, many masters would consider this practice as useless. They would only label changes. But this is a practice by musicians. Okay. Now I want to show you this example of how a musician would do melodic analysis to decide the pitch of some of the scales. Okay. Just let's listen to one example. I asked from a friend in conservatory who teaches this. Well, he's writing, so he quickly wrote and played me, and we have recorded. So this is a Makam Hüseyni, and we would expect this B flat to be a lower B flat compared to the Rast's B flat. But in his analysis, he says there is a certain part of the melody which is where the root is Re, and here you would have a Rast context. And that due to that context, this should have a higher pitch. And we will now hear two examples where he plays as it's notated and as it's interpreted after that analysis of the context. He will play again.
İlk notadaki arkasından da olması gerektiği gibi.
Again, the same order. I don't know if you could spot that difference when he played it for the first time, the two versions. Well, my experience while learning this music, when you try to play it yourself and you are, when you listen to these examples and try to imitate, in time you develop a sensitivity to these pitches. If you would put one recording on top of the other, he did a bit of an exaggeration to show the difference. So I've just cut those relative parts, and there is a 55 cents of difference, of like a quarter note. And he would say right or wrong. Okay. There is another example. I would turn back to it if there is time. But in that example, the difference is 40 cents. So the melodic analysis applied by a musician would would help him or her decide about intonation. So they decide about the flavor, and the chord material, and that would be affected. That would affect the intonation. Any questions? Just stop me. Okay. And on the instruments, we have lots of frets. And I think you may now imagine why we need those frets, because of all these little variations. And this instrument is very interesting. We have all these little gadgets on this instrument, and each would change by 20 cents or so. Okay? So they really want to have these variations from one melody to the other, even though on the notation you see the same note. Now, if I go step by step to what people from musicology do, Eric Ederer from University of California came to Istanbul and recorded some musicians and asked the musicians to analyze themselves. In the sense that he asked them to put the contour, mention emphasis notes, and also indicate changes that are important for them. So this is a Canon performer, that instrument with the gadgets. So the musician puts those chord colors, again, labels of chords, and specifically mentions if a pitch should be lower or higher. Okay? So this is what a musician would also try to emphasize in his or her playing about intonation and the change of context. Now, so a musicologist, by taking these examples, would often try to come up with a model of tonal temporal representation. Eric Ederer tried to get a list of all possible chords, how they sound, and afterwards came with this kind of a representation. Where this is the time axis, so you have two rows, and you have the pitch axis here, let's say, or the chord material. So this is the main octave, the lower chord, and another extra higher chord. So you would see that the progression would be marked with the chord names, plus some context at a higher level for the makams. In a recording, in Makam music, we would expect some changes of makams or context. So this is one representation a musicologist would try to use to compare things. And I think we can help them by providing some tools.
Sorry, I'm confused.
Yes.
By chords, do you mean pitching, or why do you have chords in a melodic progression?
Why do you have chords in there?
Here you're talking about melodic progression, right?
Yes.
And why do you have chords?
Well, see, chords in this context is a sequence of notes, or the chord material, so half of the scale. Tetrachord or pentachord, sorry. Well, I took that risk, but I hope it's clear. Another example of musicological analysis, everything manually expressed. So this is a recent analysis for studying a performer's makam understanding through improvisations. So they would first transcribe and then try to analyze this transcription to understand the melody contour. So there are several, let's say, lines and hierarchical representation of the melody contour. Some of them are influenced by Western music analysis theories. Here we see an abstraction of a melody contour, a simplified version of it. And then the core material, well, this time really making the confusion as if they are simultaneous. They are not simultaneous, but just put as a summary here, you see the notes emphasized. Not the complete chord material, the sequence of notes, but the ones that are most prevalent, let's say. And then you have the chord materials here. And above, you have the makam context. So this is the hierarchical representation they are trying to get at. But they also draw, I've seen in many examples of such efforts, they try to come up with some kind of a drawing to explain context change. These colors are manually put by the musicologist. So these are notes that are emphasized. So this note, there is an emphasis on this note, and the musicologist thinks that it has this much of a duration. So the context, well, it's his or her perception of the context and emphasis. And here is an example from that paper. So it's the same musician, the same makam, two different improvisations. They try to understand if the change of melody, the context change is somehow comparable. The pauses are also considered to be important. They specifically mark some pauses, and they try to see if the pauses have a certain function in this melody contour. And these are all manually done. Okay? The coloring and everything manually done. I think perfect fit for, again, a corpus-based study. Want to show you one example from another makam culture. This is for makam of Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine. This was as explained in the paper. Again, they would put nihavent on G, rast on G. So it seems that this is kind of a common methodology in the makam world to put these chord labels and emphasis notes. And this musicologist tries to define makam, starting from that, to obtain a model of a makam by transition of these material. Okay? So there are many other examples, but I think these are good samples to give you an idea what musicologists are after with performing analysis, and also what musicians do for analysis and understanding of the piece. Any question up to this point? I will switch now to automatic tasks I have considered. For me, well, the melodic analysis, automatic melodic analysis tasks I consider are mainly for developing educational software. I would like to go in that direction. And also carry collaborative work with musicologists, so computational musicology. And we could consider two main tasks like melodic segmentation and then putting on these segments emphasis notes and chords. This could be the starting points for analysis. And for Turkish music, we have score and audio. And it would be good to start with score because I can maybe collect some labels from the teachers in conservatory to start with. I will start by considering, well, melodic segmentation. Now, on this example, we see melodic segments from 3 different labelers, okay, on different colors. So I have 2 of them agreed to put a boundary there, 2 of them agreed to put a boundary there. 3 of them, all of them agreed to put a boundary there. And if you would look at the boundaries, I mean, there is some regularity of the boundaries. Okay. And there is some agreement, also some disagreement, but, well, I would say, let's say, if they agree on the length of the melody, the match is to a high extent. It's, well, one musician may prefer larger melodies and would define the context on that. The other ones could prefer shorter context and try to put segments on that. So it says, okay, well, let's work on this. And we have collected some manual segmentation on printed scores by 3 Makam teachers in different conservatories. So we had 3 experts. We have collected 500 scores, machine readable, and they have put segments. So from expert 1, we had some 20,000. Like they had several months to do this task. And the other experts, after some point, they said, well, they were kind of bored. They didn't want to continue. So, well, these were going in parallel. After the expert 2 gave up, we said, okay, let's have a few of overlap for all of them, and we want the rest to be also segmented. So the overlap between the 2 is only 5, 6. But on 400, we have at least 2 different labels from the experts. So those labels we have put in our data, which is, we have the SynTR database, which has the text representation, machine readable, also the scores and melodies. How much time do I have? 10, 15, okay. So this is available for those who are interested in accessing this. We have at least 500 scores represented this way from the first labeler. It was the most reliable, I would say. It was more the data was more consistent. So that was the machine readable data. When we looked at the durations they preferred for melodies, so this is the distribution from 3 different experts. One of the experts preferred larger segments, the second one. And the first and the third, they had similar preferences. And when we just wanted to compare quickly by using some standard measures like F measure, you would see that the expert 1 and 3, out of 200 pieces, they have an F measure of 0.78. And you should imagine that, well, we have, for each note, we have 2 different categories, either a boundary note or not a boundary note. And only 10% of the notes would be boundary. So in one class, 90% of the time, 90% of the notes are non-boundary, 10% are boundary. An F measure should be considered given that information. And with expert 2, the matches were less. So expert 1 and 3 were, let's say, we consider them to be more reliable. Well, the other expert also had a different choice. Now I want to have a look at where they fall, the segments they put. And this is a distribution with respect to pitches of the Makam scale. Okay? So these are the distributions of the boundary notes in the scale. And you would see that most of the boundary notes, they would fall on tonic, 4th, 5th, or upper tonic. So the important notes of the Makam. Sorry? Yes.
Before or after the boundary note, it's not the boundary note.
Well, I consider the starting note as the boundary, the onset. Okay. And this is from the first expert. But let's have a look at the other experts. So if I look at the distributions from 3 of the experts, the distributions They are very close. So they have similar preference in terms of choosing important notes of the scale as boundaries. Okay. And this was mentioned in some other contexts in Tunisian Makam music. So the Monderayari was working on it for some time. And he would write, a musical phrase tends to end on a scale degree that is hierarchically superior. The tonic, the step tonality, the pivot note, or in Arabic Makam. A recognition of a genre-specific motivic formula triggers a transition between genres, producing a segmentation. So there is also the concept of parallelism in segmentation of melodies. So if there is a motif that's known and repeated, that would fall at the boundary. That's another dimension, but we couldn't consider the dimension. Now, I also wanted to look at how the boundaries fall with respect to the usul strokes, the rhythmic strokes. So Andre played this aksak rhythm. I think I don't need to replay it, but this is a 9/8 rhythm. And we have the dum, take, dum, take. And so you would see that there is some synchronization about the important strokes in the usul. Okay? And if you would look at distribution of different data sets from different experts, again, you would see similar structures, similar distributions. That means when they make preference, two dimensions are prevalent, the emphasized notes, the important notes of the makam, and also the usul strokes. Yeah. But those were on scores. We said at some point, most of the time when melodic segmentation is considered, it's on perceived segments. This was not, our data is not collected by making people listen to it and put segmentations, but they put this segmentation on scores, just looking at it and maybe having the melody in their minds. How would that correlate with perceived segmentation? There was a recent work, they carried this test with our data, because Kara Osmanoğlu is also from our team. 15 conservatory students, they listened to recorded performance, so real performance of these examples, and also MIDI synthesis, and they put boundaries by using some wave editor program. And here are the distributions. Synthesis from score, so MIDI output, let's say, microtonal MIDI output. The blue marks are the manual segmentations by the music teacher on the score. And on the red lines, you see how many counts each point gets as a boundary note, boundary label. Okay? So when you would compare, you would see that there is a bit of a match between these segments, but there exists also some in-between segments. It's a recent study, so we didn't have the chance to go and check out their data to see what's happening on, but they had some analysis on this version where the segments are due to the performance. So they listened to a real performance and put the boundaries. And over there, in opposition to this output, we have some boundaries at locations we wouldn't expect at all. And when the authors, they looked at those boundaries, they've seen those are the phrase boundaries of the lyrics. So some of the segmentation would be induced by the phrases in the lyrics. Okay. So automatic segmentation. Now I want to be able to do automatic segmentation so I can carry corpus-based analysis of a repertoire. I have 2,200 scores, and I want to learn some characteristics of makams by putting labels, putting segmentations. I cannot ask an expert to do it. So I said maybe I could ask an expert to do some part of it and learn from this data and be able to apply it to the rest of the data. That was the target. Our target was not to come up with an automatic segmentation algorithm that, let's say, that works for all or that's based on some agreed understanding of automatic segmentation. About to finish. Well, there are various algorithms proposed for automatic detection of boundaries for Western music or Euro-dramatic music. Well, one of the most famous is the local boundary detection by Makam, where many methods in literature would consider every note and assign a strength, some function, strength function, that's computed out of duration of the notes, the pitch distance between sequence of notes, and also duration discontinuity, in the sense you may have, let's say, 16 notes, and then a quarter note. If you have another quarter note, that's a duration discontinuity. So based on these measures, there are strength functions computed, and then a threshold is learned or applied to detect the boundaries. Okay? To put it into most simplistic way of explaining the common approach we had at the time from literature. Now we said, okay, let's use features from literature together with boundary distributions with respect to Makam pitches and usul beats to design a machine learning based system for automatic segmentation. So I would take all these available tools from previous work. They have their strength functions. If I have access, I will use their strength functions, if not the decisions. And I would also use commonly used features. So onset intervals is about duration of a note, plus the pause is also included. Ratio of durations of notes to indicate duration, sudden duration changes of notes, and also absolute pitch interval, so the pitch interval in between notes. Those are the common features in literature. We also take some of the methods which are available in literature. We can access to their methods, and we add two features. Usul-based feature, so given a note, within that duration, I would take the highest value of the distribution function and assign to that note as the usul feature. For Makam-based feature, I would take the distribution value as the feature. And if if you would carry tests on these three data sets, so the S1 is data set 1, data set 2, data set 3, and just arrive at some F measures, you would see that, a method taken from literature, a well-known method, which is not designed basically for this task because they target perceived segmentation, and this is more, it's another specific task. So this is the F measure you would get for local boundary detection methods. And if you would use all of the features, so use this strength function as a feature, plus add usul and Makam-based features, the F measure increases to this level. So we could just compare these two values because this is the kind of highest among all. Of course, since the classes do not contain a balanced number of data, one needs to have a look at the values to understand in detail what's going on, but I think we lack the time for that. And we said, okay, let's exclude the new features to see if there was a specific improvement due to those two features, and the distance would be here, and they're all statistically significant, but to this level, let's say. What did I have previously? Okay, we have used MIDI toolbox to access strength functions of these methods. Also another Melisma music analyzer for using groupers function. And there was one of the authors wrote features linear discriminant analysis to implement in MATLAB. And the way we test with, let's say, cross-validation is we leave a piece out. For this task, it doesn't make sense too much to leave a note out. So we leave a piece out and do the test for cross-validation. Now, so I'm just going to close with a few remarks. So let's say automatic melodic segmentation using culture-specific information has been implemented and tested. This culture specificity, for me, has the following sense. Now, there are some features which are more salient in some of the cultures. For Makam music, the segmentation points, and they are so regular in terms of usuls or so, one tends to make use of that information. That information could have been used in some other context. But the first time, well, we look at this culture-specific problem, we say, okay, I'm going to study only this corpus, and it has these features. Then you have the chance to propose a new feature using those salient features. And then it may be applied to other types of music. But maybe the methodology is to start with a specific culture, specific database, and learn a new feature from that. It can be or cannot be extended. But that's how I would understand, well, what I refer to as culture-specific processing, let's say. So we now have the automatic segmentation algorithm. We have segmented the rest of the database we have by using expert one's data. We learned from expert one. And the next task is to put chord labels, also emphasis notes, and try to figure out if a corpus-based analysis may reveal us information about makams, the melodic contours. Okay, yes. So I would like to conclude here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you for the talk. Maybe a couple of curiosities. In the study you did, sorry. In the study you did, asking 3 experts to do the segmentation.
Yes.
Were they musicians or musicologists?
Music teachers, let's say.
Music, okay.
Yes, in conservatories.
Did you ask them to verbalize the criteria they follow for segmenting so you can have an insight of?
Now, I had difficulty at that level. I didn't want to be specific, explaining them what to do. And they had difficulty in explaining what they were doing because they don't have the specific terminology. So they may explain you the function, why they do it. But how they do it, they have difficulty. You will feel like they cannot put it into words. So this is like a practice they do. And when we asked them, we said, okay, do it as you would teach your student. Do it as you would analyze a piece of music. We didn't ask them, well, there were, of course, questions, what's a musical segment or what's a melody? And we tried to be less specific as possible and said, well, do it as you would put context on it, trying to explain it, putting labels on it. So how would you put it into pieces to analyze? I don't know if I can.
Yeah, because I think this is a very good opportunity to help them, or to help everyone to verbalize processes that are not easily put down into words.
Yeah.
And if I may ask a second quick question, yesterday we talked a bit about comparative analysis of different cultures. I think Makam is a good field for doing this from Maghreb to Uyghurs in China. I don't know if you have thought of any kind of comparing the Makam cultures in different regions.
We would like to do, but well, I feel like I haven't advanced to the level I would like to advance for Turkish Makam music, but for sure we would like to do. But well, if you have ideas and if you would be happy to collaborate on cross-cultural Makam analysis, I would be happy to do it together.
Okay, so thank you.
Thanks to you for listening.